Shuffle his cabinet, and we are joined here by our guest, Professor Siepe. I understand that you need to leave, but just quickly, just before we leave, as we wrap this up, I'm reading a tweet here by Patrick Garda, who is the former, the former ambassador the former U.S. ambassador rather to South Africa, and he says that it was a massacre, a midnight massacre, referring to the cabinet reshuffle. And you look at some of the reaction that has been coming through as well, and you look at the Mail and Guardian's headline, which says, "We will make his life unbearable," referring to President Jacob Zuma. Of course, this paper was printed before the president made the announcement. What's the president's future or prospects of the president finishing his second term as president of South Africa?
Well, I think if you read that, there is an attempt to dare the president to say, if you do this, we will deal with you. So if you are dead, you actually either respond by cowardly. But what the president said, well, I'm going to exercise my constitutional prerogative. And he has actually done that. There's nothing illegal about that. And what he has done is also to address the tensions that are in his team, which is also important to make sure that you have people singing from the same sheet. In the past, what we've seen, which is something that we have also promoted, is the suggestion that the two are probably not even in speaking terms. And you cannot have a team that is supposed to achieve anything. Actually, a divided team is not a winning team. So that is the first thing that is very important. But what one must also say, that South Africans, actually, even within the ANC, they were probably divided until certain things happened. And the president could not sit idly when you actually have such an open challenge. So you saw the SABC daring him again. So what is it that you expected him to do? So what he did is simply say, well, if you think you've checkmated me, let's see who's going to have the last laugh. And in a sense, you could see that coming. When it comes to the markets, the markets had promised that we were going to punish you. So I'm not going to be surprised that they will do so. But the question that we need to ask ourselves, instead of getting excited, that how do we participate in building and consolidating South Africa? Because there are some amongst us who think that the demise of South Africa is good because they are so obsessed with one person. Because in the end, whether it's Pravin, whether it's a president, we should not have a situation where one person decides on the future of this country. We should actually be saying our democracy and sovereignty is very important, and I think that is actually on mind. The situation that we've seen has always been unsustainable. Even the very same markets have actually said this tension is not good for us, we're not going to invest. But we've seen the markets behave like this, and I'm also not surprised about it, because they made the promise and they're keeping the promise.
Dr. Jamin, it's the president's boldness that has led to the rands. I think they've plummeted about 5%, Balisa said earlier on. And the question then is, do you at all think that this could be worse than Nenegate, considering that the South African markets haven't opened as yet? Do you think that this could be worse than Nenegate?
In some respects better, in some respects worse. In terms of the initial reaction to the event, I think the markets will react a little more, possibly a little more gradually than was the case with Nenegate, because it does not come as a complete surprise. But in terms of the longer term effect, I think it could prove to be more damaging, because with Nenegate we know that 3 days later some measure of stability returned when Pravin Gordhan was elected. Right now what I think we're going to face is a long period all the way through to December of a feeling that, and possibly beyond December, depending on who is elected as new president, of the feeling that the government is going to be captured by certain interest groups. That is the perception, although there is a lot of support from people on the ground for some of the changes and for the hope of radical economic transformation. The converse is likely to occur, and that is that you're going to have an investment strike deepening as a result.
And in between now and the elective conference, what market movements do you think we should watch out for?
Well, from market movements, I think you could well see the rand depreciating further, which will arrest the recent optimism that has prevailed regarding the hope for inflation and interest rates to come down. And that makes it a little tougher for the man in the street. And from government's point of view, what this will mean is that long-term interest rates are likely to rise, and that means that governments the amount that government needs to spend on servicing, on paying interest on its debt, will rise by many billions, and that money will no longer be available to be spent on vital things such as improved education and healthcare and the like.
Dr. Siepe, do you think at all that the market volatility and what Dr. Jamin has just mentioned, would it all have a great impact on government's infrastructure development program, the R1 trillion infrastructure development program? Would it have an impact on the projection? I think it's 1.3% that the president projected in terms of economic growth in South Africa this year. Do you think there could be an impact?
Well, it depends on what we do. It depends on what message of confidence we send out. And I think one of the first things that the Minister of Finance must actually do is to indicate that there is not going to be a runaway expenditure, that there's going to be a fiscal discipline, and he needs to make that statement as soon as possible. And also to make sure that there's actually credibility. But ultimately, so it depends on, as I says, that it's all about also perceptions. For as long as some of us continue with negative perceptions, we are going to have a problem. But the ANC also needs to get its act together. It should put the country first before it put itself. So this infighting should actually, they should find a way of better political management also within the alliance. This daring and calling press conferences and showing who's stronger than who is not actually helping, and actually it's undermining the ANC. Actually, if I was the opposition, I'd be very happy with what I see.
Well, certainly the ANC as well, certainly rather the DA and the EFF, they're quite happy with what they're seeing unfolding now. Palisa?
All right, let's say thank you so much to Professor Sipho Siete and Dr. Jamin. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it a lot.